Okay, we're on the back side of day 2 notes, and this is function notation with graphs. And then we're going to do function notation with a composition on the bottom of our notes. So remember what we talked about, that an input is an X value or a member of the domain, and a Y is an output value or a member of the range. And remember, what is in parentheses always represents the X. So in number 4, it says given the graph f of x on the right. So here, this graph right here is f of x. And we're going to find the following. So when they tell us f of negative 2, remember that negative 2 is our x value. So they're basically saying that negative 2 on this graph, comma, something. Our job is to figure out that something. So we're going to go ahead and go negative 2 on the x-axis, which puts us right here. And in order to hit the graph, we have to go up. And when we go up, we're going to end up at this point right here. And the coordinates of that point, think back to geometry, okay, would be negative 2, comma, and we went up 2, so positive 2. And so 2 is our output, which makes 2 our answer. Okay, so f of negative 2 is equal to 2. Okay, and you could write it like that too, if you want. You could say f of negative 2 equals 2, or you could just say 2. It doesn't matter. Okay? Next one says f of 1. So again, 1 is in parentheses, and so that's our x value. And so we're looking for the point 1 comma something. Our job is to figure out that something. So on the x-axis, we're going to go over to positive 1, which puts us right here. And in order to hit the graph, we can't go up. This time we have to go down. And when we go down, we hit this point right here. And the coordinates of that point would be 1, comma, and because we went down to negative 2. And so f of 1 is equal to negative 2. Or you could just say negative 2, or you could just box in negative 2. Okay, either one is fine. Okay, next one, f of 4. So again, 4 is in parentheses. 4 represents the x value. And so we're looking for the coordinates of 4, comma, something. Okay, so on the x-axis, if we go over to 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, we'd have to go up to hit the graph, and we would end up at this point right here, except it's got a weird open circle there. And so what we're going to say is that that point doesn't really exist there. So what that means is that you get super duper close to 4, 3, but you never actually reach 4, 3. Okay, so we stopped a little bit before 4, 3. And so we can't say 3 is our answer unless it was a closed circle. Because it's not a closed circle, we don't have a value there. And so we're going to call that undefined. And that's actually the answer for this one. That doesn't happen a whole lot. It happens more in pre-calc, but just so you know. Okay. All right, part D. This is a little bit backwards. You guys can tell because there's no value of x, but they are giving us a number, but that number can't represent x because if it did, the 4 would be in the parentheses. Therefore, the only other option that 4 represents is the y value. And so this one, we're basically saying we don't know the x value this time, but 4 is the y value. So our job is to figure out what is this x value. So instead of going 4 on the x, we're going to go 4 on the y value. So we're going to go up 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. In order to hit the graph, now we either have to go left or right. And in order to hit the graph, we would have to go to the left. And when we go to the left, we end up at this point right here. Okay. And so the coordinates of that point would be negative 3, comma 4. And therefore, negative 3 is our x value. And with these ones, we have to be very careful because a lot of times there's going to be multiple x values. Okay, so just be careful. In this one, there wasn't. There was only one, but not saying that in the next graph or next problem, there won't be another one. Okay. All right, let's try one last one in this graph. It says if f of x equals negative 2, then what does x equal? So again, we don't know what x is, but the negative 2 is the y value. So we're going to go negative 2 on our y-axis, which is right here. Okay? And in order to hit the graph, we can't go to the left. There's no graph over there. But if we go to the right, we would end up at this point right here. And we actually already stated the coordinates of that point, and you see how that negative 2 is what we're looking for. Therefore, x is equal to 1. Okay, all right, let's take a look at number 5. It says, given the graph h of x on the right, so this right here is h of x. We don't have an equation for it. We don't need an equation though. Okay, on the right, find the following. So they want h of negative 1. So basically we want negative 1 comma something. So negative 1 is our x because it's in parentheses. So we go negative 1 on the x-axis, and we actually hit the graph right there. And so a lot of people are like, well, wait, I didn't go up or down any. Well, you're right. And because you didn't go up or down any, that means that your y-coordinate is 0. So we're going to say h of negative 1 is equal to 0. Okay. Next one they ask is h of 1. Again, that 1 is in parentheses, so 1 represents the x-coordinate, and we're trying to figure out the y-coordinate. So we're going to go 1 on the x-axis, which puts us right here. And in order to hit the graph, we're going to go up this time. We can't go down. Okay? And we're going to go up to this point right here. And the coordinates of that point would be 1, comma, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 4. And therefore, h of 1 is equal to 4. 4 is our answer. Okay. Next one is h of 5. Again, 5 is in parentheses, so 5 is the x-coordinate, and we don't know the y-coordinate. So since 5 is the x, we're going to go over 5 units on the x-axis. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 puts us here. In order to hit the graph, we have to go down this time. And when we go down, we end up on this point. And the coordinates of that point would be 5, comma, 1, 2, 3, 4, negative 4. And so h of 5 is equal to negative 4. Negative 4 is our answer. Okay. All right, so then part B says, evaluate h of 0. What special feature on a graph does h of 0 always correspond to? All right, so the 0 is in parentheses, which means 0 represents your x-coordinate, and we're trying to figure out the y-coordinate. Okay, so if we go 0 left or right, we are right at the origin, and in order to hit the graph, we have to go not down. There's no graph down there. We'll have to go up, and we would end up on this point right here. And the coordinates of that point are 0, comma, 1, 2, 3. And so h of 0 is equal to 3. Okay, so we evaluated h of 0, and they want to know what special feature. Well, if 0 means that you don't ever go left or right on the x-axis, you'll either only go up or down, you'll always end up on the y-axis. Okay? Therefore, it's the y-intercept of a graph. Y-intercept. Okay? So anytime you have a 0 in parentheses, you're always going to be ending up on the y-axis, which is known as your y-intercept of the graph. Okay? All right, next one. It says, what values of x solve the equation h of x equals 0? So again, we don't know what x is, but because it equals 0, 0 must be the y. Okay? So we're going to go nothing on the y-axis. All right, which puts us at the origin again, which is very confusing. A lot of people get confused of h of 0 and h of x equals 0. All right, but this time we're going to either go left or right. And if you notice, if we go to the left, we hit the graph. But if we go to the right, we hit the graph. And if we keep going to the right, we hit the graph again. And so this is what I was talking about up there. We have to be careful with the working backwards ones when they give us the y-coordinate, because sometimes there will be multiple x-coordinates. And so if I look at this point right here, that point has coordinates of, let's see, what is that? Negative 1, comma 0. This point right here has coordinates of 1, 2, 3, comma 0. And the coordinates of this last point is, let's see, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, comma 0. All right, notice how all of those zeros are your y, which is exactly what we're looking for. So we're looking for all the x's, and there's 3 different ones. So we can go ahead and say x equals, and we could state x equals -1, x equals 3, and x equals 7, or we can get used to the fact that instead of writing x equals 3 times, we can use squiggly parentheses to represent a set of x values, and then go ahead and put them in numerical order with commas in between them. And when someone reads this, they read x equals -1, x equals 3, and x equals 7. But they don't have to write x equals 3 times. Okay, they use set parentheses because it's a set of x values. And that's why that x equals out here is so important, so you know what variable those numbers are equal to. Okay, and then it says what special feature on a graph does this set of x values correspond to? And because all 3 of those points are on the x-axis, these are x-intercepts. Okay. All right. So that's function notation on a graph. And now we're going to go down below and we're going to go ahead and do some composition. So notice we have 2 functions. We have an f of x and a g of x, just like we had on the front, but we had an equation for f of x and an equation for g of x. But the equations have been graphed, and that's why we don't need the equations. And we're going to be able to do it on a graph. All right. So in part A, remember from the front that you work with the innermost parentheses first. So we're going to go to the F graph, which is this first one, and we're going to go figure out F of 2. And so remember that the 2 is in the parentheses, so the 2 is the x coordinate, and we're going to figure out the y coordinate. So if we go 2 on the x, we're going to have to go up. And when we go up, we hit this point here. And the coordinates of that point are 2, 3. And so now we just figured out that F of 2 is 3. So we're going to cross it out, and we're going to replace f of 2 with a 3. So now what we see is we see g of 3. And remember, g of 3, that 3 is going to be an x coordinate. So now we're thinking 3 comma what? But remember, we're on the g graph, so we have to go over to the g graph, and we have to go to 3 on the x. 1, 2, 3. We're going to have to go up to hit the graph, and we end up at this point right here. And the coordinates of that point would be 3, comma, and we went up 3. So 3, 3. And therefore, 3 is our final output. Okay? So basically, remember, 2 went in, 3 came out, 3 went in, and this 3 came out. And that's our final output. It's a little bit tricky, but we're going to try 5 more, and hopefully you're going to get the hang of it. Okay? I'm going to erase just so it doesn't confuse us about what we put on our graph. Let's try to use the bigger eraser so it's faster. All right, and we're going to look at part B now. Okay, so again, part B, innermost parentheses first, we're going to figure out what g of -1 is. So on the g graph, we're going to go -1 on the x-axis because -1's in parentheses, so it's an x. To hit the graph, we're going to have to go down, and when we go down, we get to this point right here. And the coordinates of that point would be -1, comma, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, -5. Sorry, my dishwasher's going again. And so g of -1 is equal to -5. Hopefully that's not too loud for you guys. All right. Now we're going to do f of -5. So on the f graph, which is this first one, we're going to go -5 on the x-axis. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And in order to hit the graph, we have to go down just a little bit. And that's kind of a weird point. You kind of have to assume that maybe it's a half. I don't like going and assuming anything, but for the sake of this problem, we will. Okay. That point would be -5, comma, -1/2. And so -1/2 is our final output value. And so that's our answer. All right. So 1 went in, -5 came out, -5 went in, -1/2 came out. Okay. All right. I'm going to go ahead and erase. Oops, that's not what I wanted to do. Let's try that again. Make sure we're on the eraser. And get rid of that. And we could do this again. Okay. So in C, innermost parentheses first. Oh, goodness. Let's try that again. Make sure I'm on the right thing. Okay. So now I think I'm okay. So G of 1. So on the G graph, go over 1, which puts us there. We would have to go up to hit the graph, and we end up at this coordinate right here, which is 1, comma 3. Okay, so we're going to get rid of G of 1, and we're going to replace it with 3. And now we're going to go ahead and do G of 3. So we're going to stay on the G graph, and we're going to do G of 3. So 3 would put us here on the x-axis. In order to hit the graph, we're going to have to go up, and we end up at this point right here, which is at 3, comma 3. And so 3 is our final output value, or y value. Okay? All right. Hopefully you're getting the hang of things. We're going to erase this so it makes it easier to do the next one on. Okay. And here we go. So in part D, again, that open circle means following. Doesn't really change anything. It just means that G is following F. So F has to go first, which we already knew. Okay, so F of negative 2. So negative 2 on the F graph, we have to go up to this point to hit it. And the coordinates of that point would be negative 2, comma 1. So we're going to replace F of negative 2 with what it equals, which is 1. And now we're going to go ahead and do G of 1. So on the G graph, if we go over to positive 1, we would have to go up to this point to hit it. And the coordinates of that point would be 1, comma 3. And 3 is our final output value. Okay. All right. I'll erase. So we can do the next one. All right, so again, that's F is following G, which means G goes first. And so we're doing G of 0. So G of 0 would put us right at the origin, no left, no right. And in order to hit the graph, we don't have to go up or down. We're already on the graph. And so the coordinates of this point are the origin, which is 0, comma 0. So we're going to replace G of 0 with what it equals, which is 0. Okay? And so now we're doing F of 0. So we go to the F graph. 0 as an x would be no left or right, right at the origin. And in order to hit the graph, we would have to go up, and we end up with this point, and that point has coordinates of 0, comma 2. Therefore, 2 is our final output value. Okay? And that's, again, also a y-intercept. Okay, if you notice, and the same thing on the other graph too, it was the y-intercept, also the x-intercept. Okay? All right, one last one. We have F following F of 0. So we're going to go ahead and do F of 0. So on the F graph, 0, actually, good thing I didn't erase this one because we can keep that point. So F of 0 is 2. And so now we're going to do F of 2. So if I go over 2, I have to go up to this point to hit it, and the coordinates of that point are 2, comma 3. And therefore, F of 2 is 3, and 3 is our final output value, and that's our answer. All right, so hopefully that helps. A little bit tricky, but hopefully you guys understand it, and it's not too bad. It's just remembering that you have an input, you're going to find out the output. That output is going to become an input. When you figure out that input, that output you get was your final answer. Okay? All right, guys. Hopefully your homework won't be too bad. Give it a shot, and I'll see you guys in the next video.